Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. And we have for you a special guest today, Mr. Charles Dunaway. How are you doing today, sir? Oh, we have you. Oh, see what I told you? They
See,
muted you again. There you go. There
there
you
you go.
go.
Now I got it.
Right. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing
Good.
okay. Could you inform the people about who you are and what are your views and what do you do? Because some people may not know who you are.
No, okay. Well, I've had I started doing things like this about 4 years ago. I've been a political junkie for a long time, but about 4 years ago, I started a radio show on
Mhm.
my local community radio station, and then a couple years later, I got that show onto the Pacifica network, so that it's distributed nationwide now to all the community radio stations. And then I guess it was a year or two ago I established a podcast, and that's really been helpful.
Mhm.
And and then from there, I've suddenly become a star of Press TV for some reason. I don't know why, but okay, I'm not complaining. But they call me up once or twice a week and ask for my opinion on various um, issues that have come up or events. And I've also been in some of the other Iranian press, Tehran Times, and some of the others. But that's basically what I'm doing. Otherwise, I would be retired and just sitting here.
Well, how did you get in contact? I mean, how did they contact you, or how did you guys go about hooking up? Excuse me.
Yeah, as I recall, that what happened was I have a friend here in town who is something of an expert on the Israel Palestine situation, and they have a show on Press TV that focuses on Israel and Palestine, obviously from not the point of view they would like to hear in Tel Aviv, but anyway, so he did something for them, and then they called me, and I did a little bit for them, and they started calling me back. So I now have two or three different producers that call me, as I say, once or twice a week, and it's great for me because um, I like to write out what I'm saying, and then read it so that
Mhm.
I don't hem and haw, and I get all the points I want to make, and that's worked out for me. It's great. I practice my writing and get better at it, and it's all good.
Have you ever worked for, or have you ever written for or spoken to Sputnik TV? I mean, Sputnik News.
No, I haven't directly. I interview some people, Mark Sloboda particularly, who is on Sputnik now and then, but but I haven't been on myself.
Okay. Now let's get to some good stuff.
Yes, let's go. What are we doing
Let,
here?
now, what is your take on the current political environment in America, especially when it pertains to the so-called president-elect and the sitting president and the atmosphere around that situation? What is
Well,
your view on it?
yeah, I think we got ourselves in a real pickle this time. Um, you've got 70 million people that think that Trump is still the president. Trump has won the election, and 70 million plus, he says, that Biden has won. Um, and it's still playing out in the courts. I mean, to me, if it plays out the way it seems to be going now, in other words, that it's going to go into the courts and some judge somewhere is going to make a decision and it's going to get bumped up to the Supreme Court and all that. If they were to if they were to decide that Trump had won at this point, I think we're in big trouble. But I think we're also in big trouble if Biden is inaugurated and the Trump people think he was cheated.
Mhm.
I mean, we're in this crazy situation, and I've talked to a number of people who are on both sides of the fence,
Mhm.
And I try to make a point myself. I mean, I'm not anti-Trump particularly. I mean, I think that the guy has some good ideas about um, foreign policy, particularly, um, but does not have the capability. Uh, the he doesn't have the skill set and the knowledge base that he would need to carry those things out. Um, so we aren't getting them. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of resistance to things like getting us out of the Middle East that he wants to do, and apparently he's still doing it today. He's got these new guys in Defense Department who are pro withdrawal. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, why didn't he do that when he had time in office?
That's a very good question. Because that's the thing that's always bothered me about this. I mean, here's a guy um, who comes in and he says he wants to do all these different things with foreign policy, and then he brings in all these neocon warmongering clowns like Pompeo and Bolton and the others, and he surrounds himself with these people, all of whom are basically going to tell him no, and they're going to drag their feet and resist. There was a great little article that I think escaped attention by a lot of people. But the guy who was the special representative for Trump in Syria on the Syria thing, a guy named Jeffrey, and he's resigned. But when he went out, he was saying, like, look, these people, they, when the president says withdraw the troops, they may pull them out of one place and drive them 10 miles down the road to another place. I mean, they're really not doing anything. They're not getting us out. And so what are we supposed to do about that? But yeah, I mean, it's hard when you got resistance out in the field and resistance back in Washington.
Well, uh, George Bush's old saying is the buck stops here. And it was just brought to our attention that instead of having 2,000 illegal soldiers illegally stationed in Syria, the number is closer to 30,000. How is that?
I don't know. I mean, we don't get. And this has frustrated me for a long time. We don't get any news about Syria. I mean, now and then you'll have a correspondent. I heard one talk last year. Who's an NPR guy. He flies into a U.S. occupied area on a U.S. military plane. He does not have a Syrian visa. He does not have permission to visit Syria. And they go in and they show him basically exactly what they want him to write about. And he has a couple of hours and then he's put back on the plane and he leaves. I mean, that really, the people who are reporting about Syria need to be in Syria. They need to be walking around. And when you read people like Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett and others like that who are there and who are reporting on what's really happening on the other side, then it begins to make a little more sense. But I don't know how we have 30,000 troops there, or even if we do, I don't know.
It was a report that came out yesterday,
Yeah.
and I think it was even broadcast on Press TV, and I know on Sputnik News, and it said the number is more like 30,000 instead of 2,000. Now I want to say this: I have sources, and one of my sources told me that Russian forces have wherever U.S. forces have been stationed in Syria, Russian forces have moved like close to those forces to set up bases or to set up counter bases to where the U.S. is, and I've been told that things are actually heating up behind the scenes because President Bashar Assad is fed up with Turkey's presence there and fed up with the Kurds cowing to U.S. pressure, and also fed up with U.S. intransigence and not respecting the sovereignty of Syria's territory.
Yeah,
so What is your take on this situation as Russia continues to deploy close to U.S.
Well,
troops and stuff?
yeah, I think what Russia's obviously doing is trying to keep the U.S. troops from attacking. I don't think that anyone wants to have a war of U.S. against Russia. Well, not anybody, but anybody with sanity.
Hmm.
But and so I think that if you put Russian troops, sort of in the path of the U.S. troops, they're not going to do anything. They're really not going to attack them. They might try to, send a drone over them or something to another place, but it's going to stifle them and tamp it down a little bit. But you're right. I mean, there's no earthly reason for the United States to be in Syria at all. Never was. There's no reason for us to be supporting all these jihadi terrorists that have been, just looting and burning the country and killing people and raping women. That's ridiculous. We don't need to be doing that. That's not helping Americans. It's helping, I don't know, somebody, but it's not helping us. And that's the thing that I find the most frustrating about foreign policy in general is that we always talk about American interests,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't talk about which Americans. We're not talking about you and me. I mean, they don't care what we want. That's for sure. But um, yeah, if you were a billionaire or you own an oil company or whatever, yeah, they're keeping you safe.
Well, I want to go back to something you said that no one sane wants a war between the U.S. and Russia. Well, those people who actually push for the deployment of U.S. troops into Syria should have known that that may be one of the ramifications
Oh
of
yeah.
that, since Syria has been a long time client state or client ally
Oh yeah.
of Russia, and Russia needs Syria so it would not be boxed into the Black Sea.
Oh yeah.
So
No, it's I understand that point, but I mean, look at all the other things the U.S. has been doing. I mean, we under Obama we had this coup in
mhm,
Ukraine in
mhm,
2014, and we threw the government out and put this bunch of Nazis in charge, who basically then attacked the Russian-speaking people in the eastern part of the country and almost caused a war there. The Crimeans voted to go back to Russia, and they did. But then you've got U.S. troops and NATO troops in everything from Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania into Poland. We just put more troops in Poland. I mean, they're right up on the Russian border. And we're also fooling around with the various Central Asian republics, trying to have a little color revolution down there,
mhm,
because the idea is to encircle Russia completely and make it impossible for them to attack.
mhm,
And then I think there's some people in the Pentagon who would want to bomb Russia. Yeah, I mean
mhm.
there are definitely people in Washington who think that it's possible to win a nuclear war against Russia. Um, I think they're insane. I think it's a ridiculous and pointless exercise. Uh,
Um,
but
oh, I'm sorry. Hillary Clinton once made a statement, and I'm paraphrasing. She said it's unfair for Russia to have all of those resources over there to herself, and that America should have the rights to some of those resources over there. This, I mean, Hillary Clinton
yeah, yeah,
made
yeah.
a statement.
But if you said United States doesn't have a right to all these resources we have here,
Yeah,
we Russia has a right to get some
yeah.
of these resources, don't you think? No, I mean that's the classic thing when anybody in the U.S. State Department talks is flip it over.
Hmm.
If they were doing
Hmm.
it to us, no, no way we would permit that. What if the Chinese went into Mexico and put
Right.
bases right up along the border?
America wouldn't stand for it.
Oh no, you know, wouldn't stand for it. No, I
And
mean,
so, what you're saying, following up on what you're saying about what if China did this? Why is it that America, Americans, I should say, are so I should say, so gung ho about American sovereignty and protecting their borders, but they have no qualms or no outrage at all of the military installations and bases that violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other nations around the globe.
Yeah, well, that's not how it. I mean, how do they find this out? I mean, this is the thing. I mean, if you are a consumer of mainstream media, and particularly if you're a not really avid consumer, you don't know crap about what's happening outside the United States. I mean, if you were to listen to CNN all day, they might spend total of 45 minutes on international affairs, and then
Mhm.
it would be reading you a State Department press release or a
Yeah.
CIA press release. I mean, you're never really going to understand that we are there illegally. We're in Syria illegally. We're almost everywhere we are that we're not supposed to be. We're there illegally. I mean, that's yeah. I don't understand it, and this is a part of what the immigrant thing, and I think the thing with the borders is it's a way of convincing a certain number of people that the reason that they can't find as good a jobs as their father had is that all these Mexicans or whatever have come in and stolen the jobs. Well, no, your father's boss shipped them to China. That's what happened. And but what it does is it gets this. It's a cultural issue. I mean, if we want to define it that way, I mean, it's also a racial issue, but it's a cultural issue here that this is a way of appealing to this particular segment that's been voting for Trump.
Hmm. So again, so now we're back in domestic politics. What is the why is the atmosphere so crazy? And why is it that one side can scream a conspiracy, but when someone else, like you just said, like Mexicans or another race, scream about conspiracies, police brutality, it's a conspiracy, and you shove that off. But if you're a Trump supporter, then everybody is supposed to be outraged because you believe that the election was stolen from you. Why is that?
Well, I can't, I'm not in their heads, but I mean, a lot of this, through this whole campaign and even before, the right wing people have been pushing a certain narrative. I mean, when began to be protests after the murder of George Floyd, you heard, I mean, the right wing was telling you that these crazy Black Lives Matter people were destroying all of cities and, destroying their own businesses and looting them and so forth and so on. And there was violence in the streets, and the Democratic mayors were doing nothing about it. I mean, that was the thing that was sold to the right wing. And, meanwhile, if you were a Democrat, you were told like, yeah, these are good people who have a real serious cause, and maybe some people are getting out of hand here and there, but basically this is uh, a legitimate concern and complaint, and these are people exercising their rights. So I mean, you have a complete disconnect there, between the two sides, and I don't know how you get back. I don't know how you get back from all that and say, because this is the thing that bothers me about all of this is that we've spent so much time. And if you've not read it, I recommend everybody Matt Taibbi's book, Hate
Mm,
Incorporated, because you find out right there that what these TV networks particularly have done is they say they want to appeal to the mass audience, and they found out that hate is the number one way to do it. That if you're just, if you find somebody to be the enemy and you're always lambasting them on your network. I mean, it could be if you're on Fox, you've been, it's those crazy liberals, who want to, put the transgender guy in your bathroom with your daughter. And and on the other side, you've got this Russia conspiracy, that Trump was really not validly, he only won because the Russians, came in and put like $10,000 worth of ads in Facebook. So that um, we tell each other these different narratives, and we get to the point, as Matt says, where the other side basically becomes Hitler. In other words, you get to a point where you keep saying the other side is so bad, so bad, so bad, and then you get to a point where if they're that bad, then anything I do is justified if it stops them. And then you've got, but I mean, you've got that kind of thing going on, and I think you see it on both sides. I mean, there are plenty of people on the left, or what we call the left in this country, that got this what we call Trump derangement syndrome.
Hmm.
You've heard that one, but it was like everything. You magnify every stupid thing Trump did, because you're making fun of Trump. I mean, they're not saying, "Look, here's our president, and he's definitely needs some work," but hey, is there a way we can govern the country? Because that's what we're losing here. We're not governing the country. And
And,
yeah,
and with that, it was a point I wanted to bring up. In
yeah,
this society, it's so geared toward materialism. How
mhm,
in the world can people be outraged at the destruction of buildings and materialistic things, and not show the same outrage for the killing or the taking of a life? You can always remake products. You can always
mhm,
rebuild
yeah,
buildings. But when a life is gone, the life is gone. You cannot get that life back, and the life should be priceless. And it seems like in this society, especially in this political environment, that more the reporting and the theme line is geared more towards materialism over the sanctity of life and the security of life.
well, yeah, because that's what they're doing. They're selling products. That's the only thing they're there for. I mean, we
Mhm.
we are not the customer of the media. We are the product. We are the ones. They're selling all that uh, pharmaceuticals and whatever else they're advertising, cars. But that we're just there to consume. I mean, but yeah, and I think yeah, I don't know how we get this because we just keep the people do not understand. And I've talked with some people. I have some old acquaintances that are Trump lovers, but how do you get by this police brutality that we've had? I mean, how many people have been murdered by police because they had a broken tail light, or they were trying to uh, sell cigarettes on the street, or I mean that kind of. I mean, there's hundreds of people, and when are we going to stop doing that? I mean, why isn't somebody sit down and say, why is this so freaking bad? What's the matter with these cops? What are they doing? I mean, they're not. Nobody's really saying that. Um, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that um, a lot of money's being made here, off of this whole criminal justice,
Hmm. Hmm.
prisons and everything else. A lot of money's being made. It's like we are our relationships with countries overseas. We can we make a lot more money when we sell them weapons that they don't need.
Hmm.
And the best, of course, is to organize an army and train and arm an army to go into another country and then arm the other country to fight the army. I mean, we've done that before.
Yes.
No,
Uh,
but
um, it seems as though, well, when we look at the police violence and the constant, it seems like if a police is killed, or the outrage is national, and
yeah,
you have to. But this is the exception to the rule because it doesn't happen often. But when a victim is brutalized or victimized or killed, the outrage is suppressed by the media a lot, and it seems like there's no sympathy for the people who are suffering, because this is not something that just happened. This is out of a system that has profited off of this since its inception.
Well, I mean, I think you get to the one word answer here, which is racism. I mean, there's no question that you know, if a blonde white girl, you know, was killed by police, we'd have nationwide, you know, carrying on by the media. But you know, if it's a you know, a black man who's maybe been in trouble before, because it's really hard to, there's so many chances to be arrested in a poor community. You know, that how are you going to make it without having been arrested or something? So you've always got something in the background. And oh yeah, that's one of those guys. You know, he was a criminal and he deserved it. I mean, but I think basically we're talking about racism. We're talking about people who, well, who are racist. I mean, you know, it's simple. But, you know, and that, you know, but still, this is another part of our national problem. I mean, not just the racism, but how we want to deal with it. Because right now, what you've got is one party over here, Democrats, who are going to tell you, you know, that we're into multiculturalism and we have to have, you know, a diversity officer in every university, and we have to have all this other stuff. And, you know, then we have to have rights for gays and rights for transgenders. And you know, well, then I'm getting trigger words here in my class, so I can't. I mean, you get all these outlandish things. But of course, what the media does, they take the most outrageous example and they just talk about it nonstop. So that's how they get that over. But we don't really, you know, the answer here is not for Democrats to say, "Hey, you Republicans are racist," even if they are. I mean, you got to say, "Look, we need to solve the problem of police violence in this country, and how do we do that? You know, nobody should be getting killed by police, irregardless of the you know, and you know, but we don't do that. We go into this, and that becomes the culture war. You know, part of it, I think, goes. You know, when the Republicans talk about culture war, they're talking about the identity politics that's practiced by the Democrats. But you know, it's just as much a culture war, the gods, guns, and gays crap that the right wing does is a culture war. It's what that's about, culture. I mean, you know.
We're in the chat. They're saying they're getting feedback from your mic. Could you check it a second?
It's this one, I think. Is this it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah,
So for those of you who are listening on the other link, we just remedied that problem. Okay. So again, now let's transition to something with all of the because the police are being armed like they're military, a domestic military force, and with America spending billions upon billions and even trillions of dollars on her bases and her wars abroad, and to induct new weapons, some which are not worth the money. But how can she stay afloat, especially in an economic meltdown like now? How can the empire remain the dominant power? And before you answer that, I just want to add that I did a video a few days ago, maybe a week ago, and where I brought in all of the information that says China is now actually the #1 economy in the world. So not only does she have the top 4 banks in the world, and her 4 banks have more than the next 20 banks. And not only is she the world's lender, she's America's lender. She is the #1 manufacturer, the #1 importer, the #1 exporter. She's the #1 trade partner to almost every nation around the world. And now her economy passes the purchasing power parity line and becomes a reality, and becomes a $24.2 trillion economy compared to America's $20.8 trillion economy. And with that said, there was a report saying that America will lose at least $16 trillion of her economy this year alone. How can America continue to fund these wars abroad and fund her domestic military force here?
Well, I don't think they can. Yeah, I think that we are in the last days of the empire and we don't have too many choices here. But to get back to your first part, I mean, you're absolutely right here that one of the things is we're spending so much money on the military. And what we're doing, we're training all these young men and women on how to kill and how to use all these weapons. And what they go into a theater of combat like Iraq or Afghanistan. And yes, okay, they can say everybody else is the enemy, even if it's not true. But you can't go into a neighborhood, in Cleveland and think that the people around you are the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones you're supposed to serve. But here's where they got this training. They're getting these outlandish weapons from the military, cast offs, from the military. And they're pushing that on the police forces. And everything is going to, everything is there to, to basically escalate violence. And, they don't train them properly. But, when you talk about the bigger issue with the empire, I mean, I come down to this point that you have with the military things going around, what they call a self-licking ice cream cone. You've got this situation where you know we're we're selling all these weapons to these countries overseas. We're shipping our people over there with all these weapon systems, and we've got to have a new bomber that goes faster than the Russians can get it. And we got to have all these aircraft carriers, destroyers, and all this kind of stuff. And you think about, well, what are we defending? You know, and and we've got to the point, as you say, where we have $1 trillion a year at least going into the military that comes right out of income tax, right out of people's wallets. But then we can't feed children in the country. We can't house. I go out. If I go down the street from my house into the park down here, there's people camping. Off the side of the path in
Mm-hmm.
the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Not one or two. I mean, dozens of people out there who live out there.
Mm-hmm.
you know and why is that? Why should we be doing that? And really the somehow the answer has to go with these two corrupt political parties. And uh you've had they are basically serving the corporations. They're serving and the corporations are making money off all this stuff. The banks are making money off all this stuff. So yeah, we sell more F-35s to the United Arab Emirates. Well, great, somebody's got a lot of money now. They're making more money. We don't think about the consequences ever. It's we just keep this thing going. Becomes its own. It becomes like perpetual motion. And it's hard to imagine being able to stop it. I mean, if you want to think about, like we started off with, why is Trump now putting people in the Pentagon who want to get out of Afghanistan, for example? Why didn't he put them in, 4 years ago and actually get us the hell out of Afghanistan?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, he they don't want that. I mean, the people that's in his own party don't want that. And nobody in the Washington bureaucracy wants that because they're all making money off of it. And the reason to get involved in these other countries militarily is to make money. I mean, I don't see any reason for us to be in Syria, for us to be in Iraq, for us to be in Afghanistan or any of these other countries. I mean, and we got what, 800 bases around the world, pretty much.
Actually, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
That's what is reported a lot on. But a few years ago, I was watching the Pentagon Briefers in a meeting with Congress, and one of the top generals said that America, when you include her like training centers and stuff, America has roughly over 5,000. 5,000, and it blew my mind. I was like, "What? Over
Yeah.
5,000?"
Right.
bases around
Yeah.
the world.
For what? Well, yeah.
Mm,
I mean, people making money at every one of those bases. You've got your civilian contractors, you've got all the, Halliburtons and all the people that have to supply all the stuff that's there and all the food for the troops and everything else. I mean, it's making a lot of money, and we don't have anything else making money in this country right now. We've lost our manufacturing, intentionally. We drove manufacturing out, um, and mostly the Democrats had that pleasure. And now this is the only industry we've got is building these weapons and weapon systems and selling them overseas. And it's not it. It's hard for me to imagine that somebody go in as president and stop it because they would be under so much pressure from every quarter, and you'd have to have loyal people who agreed with your policy in all the key positions, in the intelligence and defense and state. And even then, you would have a hard time keeping the blob or the deep state or whatever you want to call it from just basically screwing with everything you were trying to do. It's frustrating your efforts. Um, there are people that say, well, if somebody really tried to do that, they get themselves killed. I mean, some president trying to do that. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
well, isn't that the what you just described? Isn't that the definition of fascism? Because
Yeah.
you just said about how corporations uh, pushes the policy and the government uh, uses the military to enforce the policy. That's
Mhm.
fascism.
Yes, it is.
Um, so we can get out of this notion that America is a democracy, and we can get out of this notion that your the elections really count. Because someone told me, a few people told me that it doesn't matter who is in office. As a matter of fact, Vladimir Putin once said when he was being interviewed, and they were asking him about that, he said, U.S. presidents have little power. He said, as soon as they get elected, men in black suits come and tell them what to do. And
Yeah,
so,
he's probably right there.
so, so he was saying that that regardless to which side the coin flips, it's still the same coin, and it's going to keep pushing the same policy regardless.
Mm,
Um, and that's what we're looking at today. So, with that said, and we are talking about the domestic, because there's a domestic crisis across America with
mhm.
the wealth divide, the race divide, the harsh policies on the middle class and the poor people, um, and the double standards also, because you get a person getting 50 years to a life for stealing a loaf of bread that they may want to eat, and then you have corporations stealing trillions of dollars, and then they get bonuses. So
Yeah.
with that happening domestically, how can the republic survive? Because you cannot survive in a corrupt, inept society that's run by thieves.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And I think so far what they've been able to do is propagandize us to an extent that, I mean, most people now will tell you, well, if we had only elected Bernie Sanders. Okay, well, you know, I mean, old Bernie would not have been able to do much of anything either.
Right.
You know, um, but you've got to people got to be informed, and part of the way they keep this power is they don't let people get informed. That's why you just had, let me get these back here. You just had all these people taken off of Twitter and Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and YouTube as well, because you know and not because they were run by the Chinese or the Iranians or any of that crap. It was because they are telling the truth often about what's going on in the world. And yeah, I think the COVID thing has also given people an excuse to pull these people off, because if somebody doesn't believe, in all the what we're told about COVID, and they bring up some alternative idea, Oh yeah, we got to get rid of them. It's bad for public health and all that. But yeah, that kind of censorship, even though it's not being done directly by the government. I mean, it's done at government direction. I can tell you that much, because they're somebody's telling them who to take off the air and who to leave on. Um, but that censorship is part of the fascism too, and the reason fascism is really a great way to keep people in line, when the government isn't doing for them what it needs to do.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we're stumbling toward an economic collapse. Is what I think. And we're going to have I've always said we have either an economic collapse, environmental collapse, or nuclear war. And that'd be the only way the empire ends. But I think the economic collapse is the more likely, because we've got so many millions of people here who are living very precarious lives financially.
Hmm.
And now
Hmm.
we have businesses being closed forever in many cases, small businesses they're just gone. Big businesses have cut way back on employees, and everybody's trying to be an Uber driver or something. But we can't continue like that. And I think part of this um, agitation that we're seeing right now over this election, it really stems out of that. I mean, that people don't feel secure
Hmm.
in the United States. And I don't mean secure in that the Russians are going to bomb us. I mean secure in that, you know, you'll be able to pay the rent at the end of the month. You're going to be able to feed your family all the way through. You're not going to have, homeless people camped on your doorstep. I mean, we aren't secure in that way. Um, and till we turn around and make ourselves economically secure, we can never be uh, secure through the military. That's just a drain. That's just money going out that doesn't do anything, doesn't help the economy, doesn't grow the economy. It's just throwing money down a hole.
So as we tumble towards an economic collapse and meltdown, how do you see that playing out in the streets, especially in this environment in America? With, like I said, with the race divide, the wealth divide, the corruption in politics, the haves are being treated different from the have-nots. The meltdown in people's security, whether they're able to pay bills or whether they're able to get medicine or
Mhm.
whether they're able to eat. How do you see that playing out over the next few years, especially as some of the debt is called in?
Yeah, I think we're going to end up with much more violence. Much more street violence in the cities, particularly. Um, because that's the combination of the economic, you know, impoverishment of the people, and racism, and a militaristic police, and all this other stuff. I mean, we're just asking for trouble. We're building a fire under the pot, and thinking it'll never boil, but it will. It's um, but if we get to that point, the only weapon the state has left is that military. So if you're going to say, well, I'm going to suppress, the uprising of the people. I mean, that would have to happen. But the thing that inhibits this is that people are all divided. That we are not united in our uh, desire to have a better life here. I mean, but we're not united in how we would get there. I mean, so you've got people split in so many different directions that it's really hard to get any traction for things. But to me, that's where the economic thing. If we do a collapse situation, a scenario like October 1929, then maybe they'll wake up, because the government doesn't care about any of us. They care about the stock market. Stock market is going well, then the economy is great. It's great. That's all there is, because those are the people that pay their salaries and pay for their campaigns and have promised them jobs when they get done being a politician. This is, um, but yeah, I can't see a way that we don't end up with some kind of violent struggle here. Now, who will win? I couldn't tell you.
Well, how would America be able to use her last trump card, which is the military, to suppress an uprising when her military is spread so thin across the entire globe? And there's an old saying is that he who defends everything defends nothing.
Yeah, you got a point there. They'd have to bring a bunch of them home, wouldn't they?
Hmm.
Well, yeah, but you've got even the military outguns even the Proud Boys. I mean, we don't have to worry about that. You know, you know, these guys running around with those AK-47s slung over their shoulder and a couple of pistols in their belt. I mean, there's no match for that tank coming down the street. That's not gonna work. Um, but yeah, I hope we don't come to that. But then you think about, well, what's the alternative here is that we have to come together as a people. We have to come together and we have to say, look, you know, there's another hurting financially in this country of all races, of all, creeds or colors or whatever. If we could get together and say, look, this shit's got to stop. We've got to turn this economy around and make it work for us. And we're not going to put up with these politicians anymore that don't do it. I mean, if that could happen, then it would all be over. We'd be able to get it through a legal way. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we can do that. I mean, can you imagine that now? I mean, not the way things are. Things have come to such a head now. I don't see us getting together and figuring out how to get this country back on track.
And I see that with all of this tension and all this division, I see that when this thing melts down, when we go to full blown collapse, I see things go spiraling out of control, especially domestically,
Mhm.
because there are so many grievances against the government, and people are going to want to look at them right now. They want to remove who's ever in office, and they want to put in whoever agrees with them. So if you got 70 million over here and 75 million over there, then you got another 150, 170 million that's
They need,
unaccounted for.
yeah.
This is explosive. And another thing that I wanted to touch on is some of America's debt will soon come due. Um,
Mhm.
we see that China has now become the largest trading partner with Asian, the ASEAN organization, and they are also implementing trade in the yuan or the renminbi. And we're looking at all of these other nations that are now starting to accept renminbis or yuan. For those people who are not familiar, that's the same currency from China. And with China being pressed by America on the South China Sea, her core interests of Taiwan, the Diaoyu or Senkaku Islands, whichever one you want to call it,
Mhm.
and with America putting bases all around China's
Yep.
periphery and Russia's periphery and in her underbelly of the Central Asian states. How do you see uh, the dollar's future? How do you see America's position, especially when she's overextended, and I'm talking financially and militarily?
Yeah.
How do you see that in the next year to
Well, I
5 years?
yeah, well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I mean I'm not as worried about the debt thing per se. I mean, I sort of subscribe to most of this modern monetary theory idea that the government could just print more money, and pay its debt with its own money. But the problem we have here is being the world's reserve currency, because if we can't buy goods from other countries in dollars, then we're screwed, because then we have to change those dollars into euros or pounds or yuan or whatever it is, and that's the only way we can buy them. And so we're gonna we're gonna crash. Like because our whole thing is built on this idea that we have the reserve currency. And strangely enough, this craziness that we have done, where we have been all hostile toward Russia and hostile toward China and hostile toward Iran and all these other countries, it pushes them together. So, Russia and China are going to start working together. They already did try with the BRICS thing, but we cut a couple of bricks out from under them. But that it's still, you've got this situation where they're not going to continue to buy and sell things in dollars, and they're not going to continue particularly to buy oil in dollars, because now they'll be able to buy oil in their own currency. And that's, I don't think we can I don't think the economy can tolerate that kind of change. I mean, I think that means that our dollar is worth much less overseas, because people don't need it. They don't need it to pay their bills. And the only reason they would want a dollar is because they want to buy something from us. And we don't have a hell of a lot to sell at this point. So yeah, I think that's really the likely scenario. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take before that comes about, but it's certainly that's what Russia and China and a few other countries are working on right now, is this idea of getting off the dollar. And good.
Well, outside of Asian, the ASEAN organization, China has currency swap agreements with about 40 or 50 other countries, and now Russia dumped most of its holdings of dollars and has replaced them with the yuan, and so has Iran. And Iran and Russia will be selling oil and gas to China in yuan. And if you notice, Nigeria, all these African nations that are oil and gas sellers to China, they're now experiencing the influx of terrorists
Yeah, yeah, and
to
the influx of
destabilize them.
AFRICOM, so that we, but and that's such a racket. I mean, really, what we've done there. I mean, you put all these troops in there to allegedly fight terrorism, and basically what they're doing is they're forming relationships with the military chiefs in all these countries. And then if the government decides to do something remotely socialist, we'll have a coup. We'll get rid of them because we're making money off of that. But you don't want to. Yeah, I don't see any way around this. I mean, we're stuck at this point with this. They're ahead of us on all this. China, by the way, just signed, was it today, yesterday, this new free trade pact.
Oh
Everything
yes,
from China, from Japan, all the way down through Indonesia.
yes,
It's all one together. They're now duty free and whatever between the countries. Because we didn't do it.
yes,
Yeah, we backed out. And so they just said, well, okay, we want this, so we'll do it on our terms. And
yes,
that ain't going to help us either. Yeah.
yes. Um, Now, for those people who are listening, when you heard him say, and we took a couple bricks from him, he's talking about Brazil and India.
Yeah, exactly.
so, so because India is leaning more towards the United States,
Mm.
and which is crazy because India, they're alienating their longtime ally, which is Russia, which is what supplies over 70% of its military hardware, and also alienated its largest trade partner and investor in infrastructure and finance, which is China, which is crazy.
That's
You know,
totally crazy. Yeah. I mean, they're the main nation out that is not in this new China trade pact. All the nations around them, Bangladesh and all the other nations, are there in this trade pact with China, not India. No, because you got Modi over there, thinks he can suck up to the United States and get all kinds of stuff. And you know, I think there's a few dictators in the world now without their heads who could tell him tell him that's not such a great idea. You know,
Yeah,
that's that's what Saddam did for us for a while. You know,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it didn't work out.
Well, in India, a lot of people don't know that it's still a lot of East-West politics going on from the colonial days. There are a lot of people that still are agents of the West, and also that want to lean more towards the West, while there are other people who want to reorientate India towards the East. So there's a big political divide
Oh
that's
yeah,
going on there right
sure.
now.
Yeah, been that way for a while. I mean, uh, the early rulers of independent India were socialists,
Hmm.
and frankly, that's why the country is in such good shape now. They
Yeah.
had several years of socialism before they started going out with this capitalist neoliberal crap and shoot themselves in the foot. But that's why they have this educated these engineers and these computer scientists and all this,
Mhm.
because they were educated under a socialist system.
Mhm. So, what do you think? Again, let's go back to something. What do you think will be the ramifications of China signing the largest free trade agreement in the world, also pushing the Belt and Road Initiative,
Mhm.
also internationalizing and liberalizing the yuan, and pushing nations to accept her currency instead of the dollars? What do you think the ramifications is that will be for the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy?
No, it's ramifications are going to be unpleasant. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, China's our biggest trading partner too.
Hmm.
I mean, you go to Walmart if you don't believe me, but
Yeah.
it's we're we don't need to make an enemy out of them, but we're doing it. Like you say, we've got them encircled with military bases. We're putting all these ships in the South China Sea. Uh, what would we do if the Chinese Navy steamed into the Gulf of Mexico? Okay, you think about that. You know, how would that work out? Yeah, and then but you have these touch points too that I think the government is using right now to try to keep Americans from understanding all of what's going on. And one of them is Hong Kong, with the idea that these are all the freedom fighters are being uh, trampled by the Communist Party of China, and they're not going to be able to get democracy in Hong Kong. Well, if you're a freedom fighter, your objective is not to return to the colonial days. I mean, they were carrying British flags and American flags in those demonstrations. They wanted to bring back. I mean, those were paid for, all of that,
Hmm.
you know. And then you've got the situation over in the Uyghur area in China. Uh, in fact, the State Department just delisted the East Turkmenistan,
Hmm.
whatever it is, jihadi group, and said, "Oh, they're not terrorists anymore." Yeah, they're still terrorists, but they're working for us, and that's where we get, yeah, that's where we get all this, it's this human rights thing that we're getting to keep us from understanding what's going on with China. We hear all about Chinese human rights. Oh, they've got the Uyghurs in concentration camps. Oh, and the freedom fighters in Hong Kong, and they're interfering in Taiwan, so we have to build up Taiwan's military. There is a foolish idea, you know, but this it's all sort of a distraction from, hey, they're outpacing us.
Hmm.
I mean, China has eliminated extreme poverty.
Yes, they have.
They have. We haven't.
Bringing 400 million people out of poverty.
They're out of poverty. You're right. And they are also leading in a lot of the environmental things. I mean, China is producing more electric cars and selling more electric cars than anywhere else in the world. They're transforming their energy, into renewables. That was things that we're not doing. Um, it's in every possible way they are out pacing us, and
Mm-hmm.
it's because it's planned.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the government sits down and they plan what we want to have 5 years from now, or what we want to have 10 years from now, and they say, well, how do we get there? Well, we want to have the electronics market. Well, we need to start building chips,
Mm-hmm.
computer chips. All right, well, let's do that, because we don't do that over here. We have the other way around. The corporations
Mm-hmm.
tell the government what to do, and the government doesn't tell the corporations what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the corporations are not interested in the American people, the American economy. They're only interested in their own profit. They want to make money now, today, this quarter. That's all they care about.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the ones really driving the government, not you and I and our votes. You know, that's yeah, it's sad, but we don't have anyone to vote for either. So.
Well, speaking on that, I was looking at an article a few days ago. Another Chinese company just overtook, I think, Samsung. China has, even with the sanctions that the United States have
Mhm.
put down on the Chinese companies, they have the number one, number two, and number three phone companies in the world now. And also, when America talks about China stealing technology, nobody sits down and look at this. China, for the last few years, have been the number one nation on earth with more patents. And they have more
Oh, yeah.
technological progress than any nation now, because they've issued more patents for things than any nation around the world. So that in itself pushes the lie out the door about China stealing the technology,
That's
because
right.
they already had the technology that the United States shipped over there, and they just made
Right.
it better.
That's right. I think you've been reading Godfrey Roberts' news.
so I'm well informed, and I pride myself in trying to give the people top notch news without addition, without subtraction, and without imposing myself into it. I want them to understand the facts, because there's so many smoke screens out here right now to mislead you and to throw you into left field. Like, if they would look at the screen right here, what you just said, and this was a few days ago, China, 14 other nations to sign world's largest free trade agreement. I mean, it is unbelievable that the people still don't have this understanding that America is no longer number one. She's no
No.
longer the top dog economically, politically, or geopolitically, and militarily. She has peers now with Russia and China.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
in some instances they have surpassed her, because China and Russia right now have working hypersonic missiles.
Oh, yeah. No, there's areas in which they've definitely passed us in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But, the thing is, you cannot keep it's just like you can't run a nation of this size by force. You couldn't if you turn this into a fascist state, and with fascist police everywhere, and nobody have any freedom, uh, damn thing would blow up in no time. And you can't do the world like that either. I mean, you've got to have the economic power. The reason people are want the U.S. as an ally is because we're an economic power, or were, and we could buy their stuff. But now we can't, because fewer and fewer people in the U.S. can buy anything, and the people, of course, who are among the few can buy pretty much anything they
Hmm.
want, and that's why you have all these. I see these things like the huge yachts that these people have in the harbor, and I think, boy, our taxes are too low, buddy. I mean, you think about it, if all this wealth, I mean, we have, what is it, 3 or 5 billionaires who have more wealth than the bottom 50%
Yeah.
of the population. Now, if you took half of that wealth, leave them a few billion, all right? And you take half of that wealth and you used it for things that we really need in this country, you know, uh, we could we could be in very good shape. And the other problem we have to do is we have to be sensible and say, look, somebody has to sit down and say, what does this country need next year or 5 years from now? If we're going to be economic power and we're going to remain an economic power, what do we need to do? And then we have to have the, the ability to do it. And that's what I say. That's what China is has it all over us because they can go to their companies and say, well, you know, you need to quit building those gas cars and start building some electric cars. And they don't provide them incentives and going to public-private partnerships and all that crap. They just tell them what to do. And they do it. It's still they're making money. I mean, they're billionaires. I think didn't they increase the number of
Yes.
billionaires by more than any other country?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
and and so I want to thank you for your time. I know the time is getting past us. I mean, you're an excellent guest, and I love it. I love talking back with people that can talk back on these issues here because
Mhm.
there's so much. It's so much to talk about, and there's so much to be done. Like you were talking about, China is successful because they've implemented the 5-year program over and over
Over
and
and over.
over again, and they
Yep.
continue to do something. Do it over and over again. This is why they went from the most impoverished nation 40, 50 years ago to now the wealthiest nation today because they kept implementing the 5-year program over and over again.
Over.
Now, in closing, I want to pose a question to you because I was reading something from Stephen Roach of Harvard, and he
Mhm.
was talking about that when he was talking about the dollar and its fall from grace, he thought it would be further down the line. But when he looked at the new numbers that came out recently, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, he is now dead set on that the dollar will lose its reserve status no later than 2021. This is a Harvard economic professor,
Mhm.
and if this happens, and if you see it happening, what do you think will be the ramifications here at home in America and globally?
That's a big question. We got another hour. No, I think. Yeah. Well, I obviously don't know. I mean, to me, yeah, I think that first of all, you're going to have the markets collapse. The stock market. I mean, if we stop being the reserve currency, and we're no longer have that, the stock market is going to go right down the tubes. But you look at this country, and I think this guy's probably right. Look what's happened to us this year. We've had to close so much stuff. I mean, and we've had it closed for so long. We've had it closed since what, March? We should have closed in February, but we haven't closed since March and it's still closed. We're still not fully open. We're not,
Mm-hmm,
China is open again.
mm-hmm,
They got it. They stamped it out and now they've moved on.
mm-hmm,
So their economy is growing rapidly. I mean, we we're losing. So yeah, we're going to I think he's right. It's going to collapse sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean the markets are going to collapse and then what I worry about is a scenario where that that we have a complete collapse in the government, and things
mm-hmm,
like because if things like social security checks stop coming, you know, I mean we can't, if the government could no longer pay its bills, uh, we'd have some serious issues in this country. And who knows? I don't think those treasury bonds would be nearly as valuable.
and also, what is this? Gerald Salente said it will be hell on earth when this thing goes down. And what what do you think he means by? And I know what he means, but I want you to summarize it for the people who are listening.
Well, the best analogy, and I think if you've read Dmitry Orlov, the best analogy
Mm-hmm,
is what happened to the USSR in the 90s. I mean, everything collapsed. I mean, the whole country just went down within like a few days. So that there was no way to get money. The banks were closed, the ATMs were shut down. You couldn't get money. You couldn't buy anything. Everything was crazy. You had to depend on your family, your neighbors to be there to take care of you. I mean, we could be in that kind of a situation if we don't. if we don't act properly, or either that, or we're going to go into some kind of fascist dictatorship, which isn't going to be any better. Yeah, because the fascists are not going to run the dictatorship for us. You know, so yeah, I think we could be in very, very bad economic times. I mean, it's the point where, if I were a young person in my 20s, early 30s, I'd be looking at what other country I might want to go to. I mean, learning my Mandarin Chinese.
That's what what is Jim Rogers said. He said he teaches his children Mandarin or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that is the country that the Chinese will be the dominant country.
You bet.
And in closing, is there anything that you would like to share with the people, or?
No, I'm just happy to be here. It's been great. I've enjoyed talking with you.
I really enjoyed talking with you too, and I got to have you back on the show. I got to have you back on the show so we can go for another hour. And because I love feedback, I love to talk about these issues because these issues are like dear to my heart, and at the same time, they're muted in America's everyday life. That's because right. People are so pushed towards keeping up with the Kardashians and basketball and foolishness, and they don't realize that the sky is falling down on them at this moment. In close, I would like to say thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show again.
All right, love
all
to.
Right, man. All right, so God bless you, and those of you who are listening, like I always say, I love you all, but remember that God will always love you best. Till we next speak again.
Okay.